Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. This is Tom Banke with Forward Community Investments, and we're excited to have you join us for today's presentation. Before we get going, I'd like to take this opportunity to share the background of how we got here today. Forward Community Investments is celebrating their 20-year anniversary in 2014. FCI transforms Wisconsin communities by supporting organizations and programs that reduce racial, social, and economic disparities. We have strengthened these communities by offering affordable, flexible loans and expert advisory services that allow organizations to grow sustainably. Our loans, advisory services, and recently added grant funds give FCI the tools to encourage and support initiatives that make positive change possible. Organizations need resources of all kinds, along with the skills and tools to manage them. Technology, volunteers, strong board governance, and financial acumen can provide some answers, but an important first step is to identify your assets and needs. Then, determine what works best and what we can do to work better. FCI can help you figure out where you stand and how to go where you want to go. With the help of BMO Harris Bank, we are able to offer this series of webinars to build nonprofit effectiveness. BMO Harris Bank is an active partner in Wisconsin communities and demonstrates strong corporate citizenship as an important part of whom they are and how they approach the community. Volunteerism and corporate responsibility are a key to the culture at BMO Harris Bank. It's how they demonstrate their commitment to and investment in the communities they serve. Well, first off, I'd like to get some housekeeping out of the way for those who are unfamiliar with working with GoToWebinar. So you can, let's see here. You can use the webinar using the telephone number provided in your confirmation email or the email that was sent from GoToWebinar. Or you can use your computer speakers, which is recommended by GoToWebinar. Questions. We want to make this webinar as interactive as possible, and we'll be taking questions during the webinar. You can submit them using the chat or questions box on the right-hand side. Right now, we'd like to get everybody used to the poll feature of GoToWebinar. We would like everyone to participate in the first poll of the webinar. Please answer this poll that is appearing on your screen now, asking what is your role in the organization. Okay, it looks like we have some folks entering their roles in the organization. Okay, great. So it looks like we have about 1/3 of the participating members as executive directors, another third are staff, and the remaining third are a mix of board members and others. So welcome, everyone. Thank you, Ben. We'd also like to let everyone know about the chat feature. Using your chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen, please enter your name and organization. Okay, looks like we have some folks letting us know where they're coming from and whom they work for. So now that we have those tasks out of the way, let's get to know our speaker. And right now, we'd like to Ben will be introducing, but let's get a little bit more into social innovation. Jeff Snell will explore how social innovation can improve your community and encourage organizations to work together to find novel solutions by looking at root causes of social problems. Jeff will give a general update of the growing social innovation ecosystem around the state, discuss organizational developments, commerce developments, government developments, and upcoming events based around social innovation. At the end of this towards the end of the webinar, Jeff will be joined by Greg Meyer, who is the co-founder of Vet Transfer, Global Entrepreneurship Collective, Inc., and Revolutionary Labs. And he will give a background of these organizations and an overview of how entrepreneurial communities are built. Right now, I'd like to turn it over to Ben Williams, who will be speaking a little bit more about Jeff Snell.
Great, and thank you, Tom. We here at FCI are really excited to have Jeff and Greg join us today for this webinar. Last month, we had Michael Goodman speaking around systems thinking, which is really around looking at the problems and opportunities from a perspective bigger than your own organization, so to look at it from the community lens and really get down to those root causes. Jeff today, and I think what's really great about the work that he does, is starts looking at how do we now take this information and look at it in a different and unique way that's creative. We worked with Jeff earlier this year along with the Oshkosh Area Community Foundation to provide a series called Tackling Wicked Problems, where we explore these issues in depth. And so we're really excited to have Jeff here provide that information. Just to give a little more background around Jeff, he is the founder of the Midwest Social Innovation LLC and co-founder of the Midwest Consortium for Social Innovation, which are a regional platform to promote cross-sector enterprise-based solutions to social problems. Again, that's a departure from using the conventional charity approaches to solving those issues that are striking us today. Having been recruited by Marquette to serve as the special advisor to the president from 2007 to 2013, his portfolio included board development, senior leadership searches, facilitating the university's largest tech transfer startup, Promentis Pharmaceuticals, and national partnerships with strategic priorities. He's the founder of Marquette University's nationally recognized Social Innovation Initiative, leading the school to become one of the first 10 Changemaker campus members internationally in a consortium that includes Boston College, Brigham Young, Brown, Cornell, Duke, Fordham, Johns Hopkins, Middlebury, Tulane, and the Universidad de Monterrey and the University of Northampton, amongst others. So again, he's a very busy guy with a lot of things on his plate, and so we want to thank him again for taking this time. And so now I'll turn the call over to Jeff to kick us off.
Thank you very much, and thanks so much for the kind introduction. I am delighted to, a little bit later, to introduce Greg and share more about how this stuff can be made very real in your community if you so choose. That's an impressive background and, more importantly, impressive success record, track record, legitimate, genuine track record that Greg and his team are eager to share with you. But I wanted to frame this up by talking about building an ecosystem across the state of Wisconsin and across the region in the upper Midwest as well. And there have been a lot of great developments in just the last 2 years. The point of today's call then is to share with you some more, I guess, meaty or exciting developments, and then find out from each of the participants where they want to plug in. I think you might find, so I hope you have a pencil and paper handy, and I think you might find a couple of the initiatives underway intersect with your good work, and you may want to learn more. And if you're already well versed in the topic, then you may actually choose to plug in and be an advocate or become a team member so that we can move the agenda forward in the state and in the region. So with that, those are my objectives. Those are the goals. We're going to cover topics. There will be a call to action for each topic that you can choose to, as I say, become an active participant. And could I emphasize that enough? I really want to encourage folks on the call to pick a way that you can plug in, pick a way that you can be active. There's a moment in hand, I think, where there is such a growing appetite for solutions to some of the nagging social problems that we're all interested in getting after. But if we can work together and start to genuinely build this community and I think strengthen what I'm describing to you as an ecosystem, a lot of this stuff can get done. And I think, as I say, just the momentum that I've experienced in the last year or two is really impressive. So I'm hoping this call just accelerates the momentum because people will actually pick a way to become part of the movement. I'd like to turn a page on you now and move into definitions and assumptions. I tend to be a bit of a purist, so I apologize if I step on toes and seem a little snobbish in terms of how I view social innovation and social entrepreneurship. and then I'll share with you some of my assumptions. So the definition for me goes like this, that social innovation is a field dedicated to solving social problems. Social innovation is a field dedicated to solving social problems. The actors in that field, the players, if you will, are social entrepreneurs. And then oftentimes the models that those actors or players use are called social enterprises or social businesses. So social innovation is the field, social entrepreneurs are the actors or the players in the field, and then the social enterprises or social businesses are the models that they use to execute on their plan to get after a root cause of a pressing social problem. I do think there are some key characteristics within those models, and that includes things like financial sustainability. And that means that if you have a completely earned revenue model, awesome. If you have a model that relies on a hybrid recurring revenue for financial sustainability, and by hybrid I mean you could have things like contributed income, but also earned income. That's also awesome. But you have to achieve a degree of financial sustainability, because it doesn't do any good to want to accomplish good if the bottom line is no good. If you're struggling month to month to know how you're able to stay in business, if you will, that puts in jeopardy building a team and actually executing on a vision. So I do think that financial sustainability is a key characteristic. A second one would be clear metrics, that there are ways of actually explaining to people in a concise, compelling way what you mean by achieving a social impact. So clear, compelling metrics. And it doesn't mean that there's a one-size-fits-all, I might add. That often comes up, is that, well, you know, what's the scorecard? Where do I find that? To which my answer is usually, well, what does meaningful social impact mean to you? And if you have to explain that in sort of a 60 minutes interview, how would you go about making a concise, clear, compelling argument for your social impact, that you actually are attacking the root cause, that you're measuring it, that you have a plan for even increased efficiency and efficacy. Another characteristic would be replication. How would you actually seek to replicate the model in other communities? I would add to that scale. I think it's great to be impacting tens and dozens of lives, but what about hundreds and thousands? So I would add scale. And then the last one that's really important to me is, how do you engage the target population, that population that was once the recipient of just well-meaning charity? How do you engage them to be part of their own solution? How are they involved in the model? And that's actually, I think, a different element of sustainability that goes beyond financial sustainability and talks about a target population, once the recipient of well-meaning charity, that now has achieved a higher level of autonomy because they're actually engaged in their own solution. One of my favorite models of this, of course, is the Aravind Eye Care Hospital. A-R-A, V as in Victor, I-N-D, Aravind Eye Care Hospital. This is arguably one of the most well-documented social businesses in the world. It's a beautiful Harvard Business School case study for those that are so inclined. And if you like the financials, break out the magnifying glass, because we have about 15 pages that you can pour through that show, yes, the financial sustainability, but also sustainability because the very populations that are benefiting from this eye care hospital are part of the system. These are women coming from the most impoverished village areas of India, for example, who had little or no life prospects, now engaged in a thriving and the largest and most effective eye care hospital system in the world. And if you're a YouTube fan and you want to put your head in a pillow tonight feeling really good about the world, watch the YouTube video on Aravind Eye Hospital. It's about 6 minutes long, and you'll see why they've garnered the Hilton Humanitarian Prize, the Gates Award, and SIVA, and so many others. So Arabian Eye Care Hospital on YouTube video is a great watch, and you'll see these characteristics in that model, the ones that I've just touched on. I also want to offer up an assumption here, and that's this, that at the core of good social innovation and social entrepreneurship is an honoring of human dignity and a desire to increase human capacity. An honoring of human dignity and a desire to increase human capacity. In other words, how do we act on the philanthropic impulse that I think unites all of us on this call? There's a reason that we took some time out of our busy day to learn more about this field. At the core, I think, is a desire to honor human dignity, that each life has great value. But philanthropy and acting charitably does not mean increasing dependence. It actually means setting people free to discover their own gifts and abilities and therefore be more autonomous and increase human capacity. So honoring human dignity and increasing human capacity, I think, at least to my mind, is at the core of good social innovation and social entrepreneurship. So with that, that wraps up the objectives and goals. I hope you were able to bear with me on some definitions and also some of those assumptions. So let's start with some of the organizational opportunities for accelerating social innovation in your community. Just yesterday, we had a wonderful meeting in Milwaukee for a new chapter of the Social Enterprise Alliance. If you have time, I'm not going to go into the details here just for sake of time and knowing that you can do this on your own, but when you do have time to do it on your own, poke around in the SEA website and find out what launching a new chapter involves. I'm very excited to see this coming online in Milwaukee. You know, ironically, years ago, Milwaukee played host to the first SEA conference, which are now, I understand, are called convenings. But go figure, in the grand irony of life, Milwaukee does not have its own chapter yet, and I think that's about to change. So I'm excited to see that come online. And if you had been in that room and looked around to see the 25 and 30 individuals from truly cross-sector, I think we've got a great team coming together, and there is a leadership team that's been identified. But these are not cumbersome ways to start to build community, and SEA is just one model. Another might be learning more about this Midwest Consortium for Social Innovation, also truly cross-sector. This is legal, capital, higher education, environmental, whatever your interest is, there's a neat way to build a virtual community and learn from each other so that, again, the needle can be moving meaningfully in the next 3 and 5 years to build a robust consortium of social innovation in Wisconsin and in the upper Midwest. Ashoka U is a subset of that, of course, and Ashoka is the largest gathering, the largest network, I should say, of social entrepreneurs in the world. If you're not familiar with Ashoka, I encourage you to spend a little time on their website, read up on some of the 3,000 Ashoka fellows who are doing amazing work using these models that we're describing in the field of social innovation and social entrepreneurship, driving sustainable systemic change, most of whom, the majority of whom, do this on a national level, attacking a root cause of a pressing social problem in their corner of the world. Well, to their great credit and wisdom, Ashoka launched a university consortium called Changemaker Campuses, and that's part of what was being touched on earlier in my own introduction. It turns out that some of the more robust areas in the U.S. where there are thriving communities for social innovation, there's a university or a college that serves as an anchor. And you know, not surprisingly, these are densely populated areas, and universities do a pretty good job of collecting information, codifying it, shaping in curriculum, graduate and undergraduate, or even sort of the continuing education type or professional education, executive ed type programs that we could talk more about if the questions on this call warrant. But go to your, most of the people on this call I suspect have an alma mater, and feel free to reach back to those schools and ask them what they're doing to build out social innovation and social entrepreneurship in their academic enterprise. And just a couple of others, Fixes You. Fixes You was, or is a platform that was launched in partnership with the New York Times. And my good friends David Bornstein and Tina Rosenberg serve as the authors of a column that is now in the top 5 most read of the New York Times digital pages, and it's called Fixes. Fixes documents average Janes and Joes in communities much like where many of us grew up, and they learn to roll up their sleeves and start to solve these little social problems in their communities before they take on big bureaucratic programmatic efforts, sort of a sledgehammer going after an anthill approach. And Fixes is, if nothing else, beautifully inspiring because you see the ingenuity of these Janes and Joes, and you ask yourself, if they can do it, why not me? And how can I start to learn from the hundreds of case studies on the Fixes site? Well, Fixes You is available to you precisely for that reason. You can download these little mini case studies and use them to find out who else in your local community has an interest in the same social problem and how others across the world have actually gone about solving something similar. Simply in your Google search bar, enter Fixes You, and it should pop up. And you'll be right there in the front row to access these little mini case studies. Encore is a group dedicated to second career. I'm on the tail end of the baby boomers, and the folks that are a little bit ahead of me are already into early retirement or are launching a second career. And as many of us know, these are individuals who have great network, real life savvy, and what a shame to have that all sit on the sidelines. So to the great credit, Encore, which was actually launched by an Ashoka Fellow, is tapping this Wisdom Council and putting all that know-how back into the marketplace with a special emphasis on solving social problems. That's another one that's easily discerned and found just doing a simple Google search. Net Impact tends to be more on the business side, but this is a group that is dedicated to the sustainability, of course, in a true business sense or conventional business sense, but also getting after social impact. That's also open to launching chapters in your local community, and if you've got an alma mater with a business school or someone with interest in educating people around business models, Net Impact could be for you. SE Core is a simple example of college-age students, largely, who are building their own communities. But I wonder if that model wouldn't work for you. Maybe you're part of a marketing team. Maybe you're working in finance, working in legal, working in social service. And why not build your own community of socially innovative-minded colleagues? And so SE Core is mentioned here simply so that you can learn that there's nothing preventing you from launching your own community in the social innovation space. And then lastly, Bull City Forward. My friend Christopher Gergen down in the Triangle area, North Carolina, has done some marvelous work. If you haven't had a chance to get exposed to what he's building down there, I encourage you to do so. I think at last count they've started something over 100 businesses, and he also enjoys some dedicated space in the business journals and periodicals down there to help push out the good work that's happening through Bull City Forward. And this is truly a cross-sector where they work with the United Way, they work with volunteer groups as well, so that nobody has a reason to be sitting on the sidelines. If you want to enjoy meaningful change in your life and bring your gifts and abilities to bear in your community in some really powerful ways, Bull City Forward provides some really great models for that. Thank you. On commerce and structures, L3Cs, benefit corporations, a little differentiation from B Corps, PRIs, mission investing, and social impact bonds. So I'm going to touch on these really quickly. L3Cs is being explored in the state of Wisconsin thanks to a couple of legislators in the Fox Valley area. The third L, in addition to limited liability, the third L is lower profitability. And here's what that means. Let's say I wanted to start a business that employed X offenders, and part of my goal, of course, was to drive down the recidivism rate. So it bothers me that it costs $100,000 in change to lock somebody up again with 83% recidivism rate. So when an offender re-enters a community, 83 out of 100 are going to be back in prison again. What a waste of human capacity. What a waste of social resources. So what if I launched a business and I had investors understanding that part of my landscaping platform is going to involve helping drive down recidivism? Well, that means that we're going to suffer a higher rate or higher costs for recruitment and retention than an otherwise conventional landscaping company. But I want investors to understand that. I want them to know that we're creating social value in addition to building a sustainable business. And so there may be a degree of lower profitability. It may not be 10% in 20 months, but it might be 5% over 30 months. But we have to accept that the economic value is not the sole indicator of success. That as we keep track of, with clear, compelling metrics, that we are in fact driving down recidivism among this target population, that's also of equal and perhaps even greater value than the economic value solely. And so that requires a different kind of investor. Well, one of those different investors might be a private foundation. And PRIs are program-related investments. Some of the language more recently involves mission investing. So this would mean that a private foundation sitting on a bundle of assets would actually be able to tap those assets and become an investor in an L3C. Presently, there's not enough clear guidelines for those private foundations to free up that capital. Again, what wasted capacity? And this goes beyond just the grant making, I might add. This is actually allowing those trustees, directors of the private foundation to tap assets and basically become a social venture capitalist, if you will, in a business that has a social value in addition to that first bottom line. The benefit corporations and B Corps, I encourage you to do a little research on your own. B corporations tend to be more of a clearinghouse where you have a good housekeeping seal of approval granted to you if you meet a certain threshold. It's basically a 200-point system, and it allows you to opt in so that as part of your business marketing, you're able to declare yourself a B Corp. And that's a little bit different than a benefit corporation. Benefit corporation is, in fact, its own legal entity in certain states. Wisconsin presently does not enjoy a legal entity known as benefit corporations. There are pros and cons for that, as you'll see in your own research. You can get a lot of it done through an L3C, and the metrics are a little bit different, but I won't go into details here again unless the questions on this phone call warrant. And then lastly, the social impact bonds. There was a nice presentation made yesterday about how the state can be exploring this new movement that really, I think, has its roots in the UK. Here's the point. Let's use my example again about driving down recidivism. As we all know, there are plenty of government programs targeting this, and it could be job training programs, et cetera, with the same desired outcome, how to drive down recidivism. But what if we tap the marketplace of ideas and somebody comes up with a business or an approach, a program that actually has greater efficacy? What's in it for them to actually bring that effort, that program, that business online and achieve even greater outcomes than what is currently in place through, say, a government approach? A social impact bond basically provides the vehicle for a better model to be implemented, and the cost savings is actually then enjoyed by that entrepreneur, that social entrepreneur. And it's an innovative way of getting greater outcomes that reduce costs, which I think we're all interested in, and how to structure that in such a way that you have basically a bond vehicle that incentivizes this creativity and has an upside for those who get greater outcomes. These are all some really creative things that we're looking at in Wisconsin, in the upper Midwest, in ways that I think that through commerce and structures you can accelerate social innovation in this community. Great. Now we're into Greg. Greg, are you on the call with us on the webinar?
I am.
Great. I'm going to ask if I could be so bold for you to speak up a little bit. I'm hearing it a bit faintly. And Greg, I'm so impressed with what I've seen and experienced firsthand with your work and what you bring to the local community. So if I may, without any disrespect, I would rather go short on an introduction and let you share your experience and some real examples of what you can bring to the community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg Meyer, and I'll provide some comments in the end. And then Greg, I think you're going to go about 10 minutes or so, and then we can see what questions pop up.
That sounds great, Jeff. Can you hear me a little bit better?
Perfect. Thank you for that.
All right, awesome. All right, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone today about my favorite topic, which is entrepreneurship. And then going to, like Jeff said, in the next 10 minutes, give a brief sketch of our work. Can everyone see my screen, or is it up?
I'm seeing it here. Looks good.
Yep, we're seeing it.
Okay, beautiful. All right, so we run, and we'll go into more details here in a second, 3 accelerators. Revolution Labs, which focuses on people in the central city of Milwaukee. Emergent Labs, which focuses on young folks interested in technology entrepreneurship, predominantly young, racially diverse and poor. And then Victory Spark, which focuses on U.S. military veterans. My colleague Nick and I both teach at UWM and MATC. And then just the logos across the bottom. We were recognized by the President of the United States as part of his Champions of Change program, but in Forbes, NPR, Wall Street Journal. And at the beginning of this year, the British government had brought us over to share the work that we're doing here in Wisconsin with their leadership team. So just a quick framework of what I want to talk about. It's mentor-driven seed accelerators. We focus on innovative startups in underserved communities, and we've integrated what's considered the 21st century's best practices for teaching entrepreneurship. And by the way, I talk fast, so I'll be able to cover a lot of topics in 10 minutes. So I want to try to answer these questions in the next 10 minutes. Why innovation? Why startups? Why underserved communities? And you can read the rest. And I'll have a header for each of those and try to address those questions. First, why innovation? So if you can see this chart, it's probably somewhat small, but the one I'm kind of circling my arrow around right now to the right with this line that goes up steeply over time, this is the history of GDP. This particular one is the US and the UK. And basically nothing happened in terms of GDP for thousands of years. And then somewhere around 1870s or so, we began the second industrial revolution, sometimes known as the technology revolution, and we have this massive upward trend in GDP growth. The fact that we're talking via computers over the internet, so forth and so on, is all embodied in this period of history here. And so people have estimated that over 92% of this growth is attributable to innovative entrepreneurs. And so that's why we focus on innovation and entrepreneurship. It's literally been the driver of our economies for the last 120-some years. Just quickly on the screen, I have some examples of what we mean. Naturalistic Beauty is a single mother of 5 living in the inner city of Milwaukee. She created a product, a hair care line product and other natural beauty products, is now selling all over the world, has 30,000 Facebook followers. And so that's kind of our target audience of people who can scale up, as Jeff had said earlier, who can take their products outside of their community and sell all over the U.S. and around the world and grow the economic base of where they live. The issue of these innovative entrepreneurs and things of that sort was identified in the 70s, tied a little bit to Winnie the Pooh. Like the heffalumps in the story, they're very mysterious and they're hard to find. So there's not a lot of them. They're very hard to find. But interestingly enough, which is problematic for places like Wisconsin, even more so going forward, and down at the bottom there's a little heat map here, and this is from Richard Florida's work, is that they tend to concentrate and like to be near each other. So as places become more innovative and more interesting to these folks, they tend to attract talent from locations to these particular spiky areas. This was particularly interesting when we were in the UK, is that London is basically draining the rest of the UK's talent to the city itself, and they're trying to figure out what they do with all the other communities throughout the country. So why startups? About 4 years ago, we got our hands on a new data set, and then some of the research come out of that, in particular the work with Tim Kaine out of the Kauffman Foundation, showed unequivocally that all net job creation in the U.S. comes from startups. No startups, we actually go negative somewhere around 3 million jobs a year. We also know now, and those of us who live in older industrial cities know this too well, companies do not bulk up as they get older. They actually seek economies of scale, and they shrink over time. Why do we focus on innovative entrepreneurs in underserved communities? Well, we got a sense, right? All economic growth for at least the last 100 and some years has come from these innovative entrepreneurs, and they're important to the community. So my colleague Sam White and I, Sam up at UWM, he and I looked at just, and this is not a scientific study, the slide you're looking at now says why underserved communities, but to try to get a sense of what should be the entrepreneurial capacity of the inner city of Milwaukee. And we found there were roughly about 250,000 adults living in the relevant neighborhood. So we took the Kauffman Index on entrepreneurial activity for Wisconsin, and we roughly came up with there should be somewhere around 3,000 startups per year in the central city of Milwaukee. One of my colleagues then looked at filings with the DFI. So these are new business filings for the state. And again, this isn't scientific, but we tried to approximate zip codes to the neighborhood. And we found in 2013, there were about 78 filings in the first half of the year. So somewhere we were missing about 1,500 startups that we should have seen filing entity selection, similar to what Jeff discussed earlier. I have across the bottom there, productive, non-productive, and destructive. This comes out of a work of an economist who focused on entrepreneurship, William Baumol, a paper he wrote in the 90s, that entrepreneurs are not like wine. There's not good years and bad years for them. They're always present in communities, but they're either doing productive, non-productive, or destructive things. And so somewhere in that gap of a couple thousand startups, we probably have a lot of people doing non-productive and destructive related entrepreneurship in places like the central city of Milwaukee. Next two questions that I teed up, what is a mentor-driven seed accelerator, and what is 21st century entrepreneurship? So about 9 years ago in San Francisco, a group got started called Y Combinator, and that was the birth of the modern seed accelerator. About a year later in Boulder, Colorado, two guys, Brad Feld and David Cullen, said, hey, we should do something like that, but it should be really entrepreneur-friendly, and it should be driven by mentorship. And that was the birth of the mentor-driven seed accelerator with a group called Techstars, which is the top-ranked accelerator network in the world. We're actually a member of the network, the Global Accelerator Network, which represents about 60 of the top accelerators all over the planet. So that's kind of the birth of the mentor-driven seed accelerator. On 21st century entrepreneurship and what we teach both at UWM and we integrate into our accelerators is the slide where I have something called human capital. The top guy is Steve Blank, not time for his story today, but Steve called into question what he was teaching night school at Berkeley in entrepreneurship because it was nothing like what he did as an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. And he wrote a book now a little over a decade ago called The 4 Steps to the Epiphany that has started the cult following, now is a global phenomenon. He was featured on in Harvard Business Review late last year. But his methodology, when taught at a school, and generally we call the Lean Launchpad program, and it is really focused on talking to customers early in the process. The guy below, Alexander Osterwalder, recently minted grad student in Switzerland about 3 or 4 years ago, put something in addition to his book in the public domain called the Business Model Canvas. And that Business Model Canvas in all the major centers of innovation around the world has displaced the business plan along with Steve's methodology. So we combine this kind of human capital part with the social capital piece. There's a third part that we consider important to 21st century entrepreneurship, which is infrastructure, but we can talk about that another time. All right, last slide. How are entrepreneurial communities built? So just like we know a lot more about how to start businesses in the 21st century and grow them, we actually know a lot more about how to build entrepreneurial communities in this century. So coming out of Boulder, which is now the highest concentration per capita of entrepreneurs in the United States. So Boulder, a sleepy college town about 8 years ago, now has the highest concentration per capita of entrepreneurs in the U.S. But the key points are these. You have to be entrepreneur-led. In other words, it can't be top-down. If you're trying to decree an entrepreneurial ecosystem, that won't happen. You need to support the bottom up. It's a long-term process, 20-plus years. There's a great experiment that's been going out in Bend, Oregon for about just 10 years now, and they're on the midpoint of the track, and you can see the change that's happening out there. It's got to be inclusive. Everyone who wants to be involved can, and they'll sort themselves out. The sharp elbow, I own entrepreneurship stuff won't work. And sustained engagement. This is a big change, and we still see this happens a lot in communities. Short 2-day, 3-day events, mini conferences, weekend events doesn't work. You've got to stay engaged with the entrepreneurs over long periods of time. And so the last thing I want to show you is something that's kind of a labor of love that we keep on adding to here over time. So can you guys see this mind node map? Can you see it, Tom?
Yes, we can see that, Greg.
Okay, great. So basically, this is what's happened in Wisconsin in the last a little over 3 years now. So if you go up to the top and you see the green line, these are all the veteran startups that we've helped get going and funded. This week, Thursday, we started another 12 companies. If you look down here in kind of the aqua color, this is the original Seed Accelerator. We started about 3.5 years ago in Wisconsin, 94 labs. And then these are all the startups that came out of there. This brown tree is the continuation of 94 labs in Generator. They'll start another 5 to 7 this summer. Emergent Labs was the one I mentioned that we started last year. And then Rev Labs was the Central City Accelerator. So collectively, by the end of the summer, we'll help start and fund over 100 companies here in Wisconsin. And then the interesting piece around the entrepreneurial community, if I scroll up here and we look at the stuff in the yellow and the blue and off to the side, most of these represent relationships that didn't exist or were not prevalent in our community just 3 years ago. And these go from investors and people like Steve Blank out in Berkeley and folks on the West Coast, the White House, and then other technology hubs and connections that really did not have a tie to the state. So there's a lot of truth in starting companies, helping entrepreneurs and getting them going, and let the rest kind of play itself out. Seems to be working for us here in Wisconsin just as it did in Boulder and other places around the world. And that is it.
Nice. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks.
Hey, I have a couple of quick questions for you. What is the appetite in your experience, or even the motivation, I guess, for folks to show up and participate in your workshops and learn from you and Nick and others? Do you see much in terms of this idea of having a positive social impact tied to a business plan, or is this more solely about a conventional entrepreneurship to make money? How do you see that shaking out in terms of the audience that you attract?
It varies, Jeff. So in some ways, right, and different than your definition of social entrepreneurship, the fact that these guys create jobs and other things, especially in a place like Central City of Milwaukee, has a positive impact no matter what. We see always in the mix, in kind of the nature in general within entrepreneurship, that a lot of people have some sort of social objective. A lot of the veterans in one of the companies that will be in starting this week is specifically focused on helping disabled veterans. We had, which you know well, that salsa lady and her company. They're focused on urban food deserts in the Central City and how they can scale up a model around that. So we tend to see a mix. We try to, at the very least, have a few people in every class who have some sort of true social objective. But almost everyone has an objective, and this is true Central City, veterans, Emergent Labs, of helping out the community in which they exist.
Sure. And I'd like to offer up to the audience, to the participants, a caveat, and that is this. Please do not be misled that somehow social entrepreneurship is being presented as triumphal over, quote, conventional entrepreneurship. I do not believe that. I do not espouse that. And when I encounter audiences or individuals that take up the cause of social entrepreneurship as being better than, I actually try to go out of my way to offer a polite qualifier. So I think entrepreneurship and sustainable businesses and making a living, awesome, without apology. What I think is interesting is, though, in my experience anyway, the next generation of business leaders that we encounter in so many colleges and universities, they are in fact motivated primarily by this idea of significance and meaning through their work, knowing that, yes, the paycheck really matters. They have to get off of mom and dad's couch, but they don't want the paycheck solely to be the measure of their worth and their human journey. So anyway, I wanted to offer that up to say no triumphalism here in terms of social entrepreneurship being better than. Now I'd like to offer one more, and that is this, that even if everybody was employed, if we had 100% employment, we would still have social problems. So for those that might contend that Henry Ford is the greatest entrepreneur this country's ever known, I would take exception with that as well. So that's not to say simply full employment solves all the social problems. It doesn't. So anyway, it's a big tent, isn't it? We can all come at it from different perspectives and roll up our sleeves to build sustainable models that get after root causes of social problems, make a living, and also see our communities improve. Greg, one last question for you. You mentioned this thing called the Lean Startup Canvas, or the Business Model Canvas. Can you give us another minute or two on what that looks like and how you see that working with your audiences?
Yeah, let me just see if I have, I don't know if I'm still up, but I think I have, yeah, this, let me see if I can make this on, that's not the canvas. Hold on, let me go here. If I'm still on the screen.
There's a site, while you're looking for that, I know there's a place that I've gone to as a resource once in a while. It's called Lean Stack. Oh, there you go.
If you guys can just see it, it's kind of fuzzy. I just pulled it out of another presentation here briefly. But basically, we have 9 sections in the business model canvas. We spend our time basically, and as we'd say as entrepreneurs, everything at the beginning is a guess. We get them onto the canvas, and then we use Steve's methodology to test those guesses. So a lot of our focus, especially in the accelerator, is do I have product market fit? In other words, are my value propositions of some interest to a customer segment, and are they willing to pay me for it? So a lot of the emphasis in the early days is connecting value props. Am I actually curing someone's pain, creating a gain? Am I doing a job they need done in Clayton Christensen's terms? And are they willing to pay for it? So we spend the focus of our time, and we keep kind of, if you will, track of what's going on as we develop a viable business model within this canvas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a neat model. I've seen this work in sessions dedicated solely to social innovation and social entrepreneurship, and conversely, sessions dedicated solely to conventional entrepreneurship. It's great stuff. In fact, that, at least in my experience, and I've talked to a number of folks on the university side, this is the new way of actually getting businesses up and going. You know, finding out what your minimal value proposition is, or your most valuable proposition, and that gets after easing the pain of your hopefully paying audience, and then spitballing, if you will, what the business looks like. And this has replaced the conventional business plan. It's very seldom anymore that business schools are using a conventional 20, 30-page business plan, but instead a 1-hour exercise using the canvas that Greg is describing is really powerful learning. Hey, I'm going to, before we turn it back over to our FCI hosts, I wanted to touch on a couple of events. I've received some communication already on the phone call asking about how to plug into a social innovation community. And I mentioned this thing, SEA in Milwaukee, for example. If you do want to participate in that southeastern part of the state, let our hosts at FCI know, and I'm sure they'll send that back over to me or to Greg. We'd love to get you plugged in the ground floor of that Social Enterprise Alliance chapter in Milwaukee. And then if you're elsewhere in the state, I'd just like to go back to something I mentioned at the top, and that is what's preventing you? Why stay on the sidelines? If you have colleagues and friends that have a shared interest in a social problem, or perhaps you have you share a sector. As I say, maybe it's finance, maybe it's legal, maybe it's something environmental, it could be social services. I would speak, I'm going to say with high confidence that if you start mentioning this idea of solving social problems, you'll find people who are interested, and you can start your own community. And then explore the ones that were on the slides earlier and see if there's something that fits for you, and give yourself a little bit of structure and focus around the group that you start to convene. So please do that. There's no need to sit on the sidelines, and we can genuinely accelerate social innovation in our communities across Wisconsin and the region. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to our FCI hosts. I see we've got a few minutes left for some additional questions, but Tom, do you have I'm sorry, I was going to talk about events. Pay attention to also to the flying car in Milwaukee. I want to say that Thursday and Friday, the 26th and 27th. And this is an event built into the Greater Milwaukee Committee's and the business community's attempts to put a greater emphasis on innovation in the southeastern part of the state. And Flying Car also has a social entrepreneurship competition. So we did this last year, for example. I think we started with something like 70 applicants. We narrowed it down to about a dozen from places as far away as Washington, D.C. I think somebody flew in from Vermont. I think we had an applicant from Ireland, as I recall. We assumed that it was Midwest Ireland since it was a Midwest competition. But we narrowed it down to 10 and 12 presenters, and it was a lot of fun to watch some very bright people come up with sustainable models to attack root causes of the social problems. Also, Brady Corporation, I believe in November of this year, is going to have a finalist round. So you'll be actually competing for, I believe, a $25,000 purse for what is in essence a social entrepreneurship business plan competition. Brady Corporation, the $1 billion all things identification, labels, etc., up on Good Hope Road in Milwaukee. Brady Corporation is the corporate sponsor. And it's a lot of fun to see people walking away with cash in their pockets to move their plans forward. And that should be in November. You should be able to find more information about that, again, through the Greater Milwaukee Community website. Meanwhile, Flying Car is coming up quickly. As I say, I believe that's Thursday and Friday, June 26th, 27th. And then Brady Corporation hosting sort of the finalist round come November. Brady is paralleling in many ways what Dell Corporation did with University of Texas at Austin, launching the single largest platform nationally for social entrepreneurship business plan competition. I believe that's a $50,000 purse. And you can find more about that at Dell Social Innovation Challenge. You may also look under, I believe it's VERB, as in a grammatical term, VERB, V-E-R-B, VERB. So with that.
Thank you, Jeff. Oh, pardon me. I was just going to say we will be sending out links to a lot of the materials and references to different resources that you mentioned, and we'll be sure to include those on there.
Great.
I think after hearing from both you and Greg, a lot of our minds are turning on how can we apply this to the social problems and challenges that we're facing. We've gotten several questions that have already came in, and so if you have any more for the participants on the line, please do submit those through your chat and question function, and we'll bring those up. I think just as another plug to the business model canvas, we've been seeing more and more that where traditionally a 10 or 20 or even longer page business plan is often done for the benefit of the staff. I think having those one-page business model canvases are a great way to really test, validate, and communicate what you're doing in a succinct fashion, and we've seen that being used in strictly nonprofit as well as the for-profit and social entrepreneurship ones. And so we'll be sure to send out some links about that as well.
Excellent.
One of the first questions that we received was what either of you feel about collaboration and its role with social entrepreneurship. It seems to be becoming more and more of a focus of funders to look at how do we combine resources across organizations. Have you been seeing that playing into social entrepreneurship as well, or is it more typically a single organization that has a new idea and then they bring people on later?
No, in fact, Greg, pardon my jumping in. I've seen this up close where there's a an element within the SI space called collective impact. Collective impact. And for those that just find the terminology of the concept intriguing, take a look at that Stanford Social Innovation Review. Stanford Social Innovation Review. Go on the website and take a look at some of the articles that SSIR has published on collective impact, because this has really grown just in the last 5 years. And to your point, there are indescribable inefficiencies so often across the social sector. I'll give you a quick example where I had some freshman students at Marquette University a couple of years ago. These were young women, 18 years old, in my honors freshman course at the time. And they had a special interest in the Milwaukee County efforts to address domestic abuse. And so they looked at the number of women's shelters just serving Milwaukee County. There were 21. 21 by their math. Now, I haven't gone to verify this, so apologies if this is inaccurate data. But I don't think they're far off. So they took the time to call each of the 21 organizations and learned, according to their research, that these were wonderful organizations overwhelmingly acting unilaterally. So what would it mean to have 21 organizations dedicated to primarily the same space actually working together or collectively to achieve even greater impact? And you start to get a sense of how good collective impact gets us a lot farther when we're willing to bring down the walls, operate less as a fiefdom, and move more collectively to achieve a desired outcome. We can get a lot more done that way. So thank you for broaching that. Greg, if you have anything to offer.
No, just in our world, in part because a lot of the stuff is emanated from the West Coast, we share all over the world our work. Everything Steve Blank has ever produced, every video is online. So at times in communities that aren't used to such flatness or openness struggle with that a little bit, but this stuff is publicly available and entrepreneur friendly. So that's my side, but that's all I have.
Thank you.
Great. We have a couple other questions. One I think was more of a positing for framing, and that was to shift the language from solving social problems to building social innovations as a way of taking the appreciative approach of the assets that exist there. And I think that's a lot of, the way that you framed and discussed it, it sounds like that's what you're doing, but I thought that was an interesting way to start changing that conversation.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's great insight. Agreed.
One question that we had was if you had any examples of people addressing social innovation or collaboration in rural areas where the populations may not be quite so densely comprised.
I know of one good example up out of the Fox Valley area that's designed specifically for rural health communities where the access to the health care is challenged precisely because of the countryside and the absence of any more of a central means of delivery of the healthcare system. So I don't know of many, but that's one that crosses my mind, and it was designed specifically in the space of healthcare so that there was a way of basically providing almost a mini exam room on wheels and making the and providing that accessibility that otherwise was lost because of the rural location. But if that questioner would be so kind to follow up with you, I'll be sure to close the loop and give them that model and give them a website and probably the executive director's name as well.
Great. We'll be certain to do that. And some people have some very organization-specific questions, and we'll do the same to connect them as we go. So if you're on the line and have a question specific to your organization's challenge, we're more than happy to move that way. It is about 1 o'clock now, and I want to honor and respect everyone's time. I want to thank both Jeff and Greg once again for your time and today's content. I think this was a wonderful discussion, and I think, again, as everyone like me is thinking, how do we work this next? And I think the question that you posed earlier, Jeff, around what's keeping us from doing something is really a great way to start looking at that. So I'd like to join in thanking both of you again for donating your time today for this conversation, and also to BMO Harris Bank for their support. We'll be sharing this presentation and webinar recording as well as the links to the many resources that Jeff and Greg referenced to everyone in the coming day or two. I'd encourage all participants to review our website at forwardci.org for more information. Our next installment of the 2014 Virtual Leadership Series will be taking place on July 15th and will be presented by Vicki Clark, who will be discussing diverse thinking and board trends in engagement. I think it'll be a great conversation to flow from this. And then as a last and final note, when you close your browser from this session, you'll be taken to a very concise questionnaire to evaluate today's webinar. If you could please take a few moments to complete it, we use that to continue to improve the effectiveness of our offerings. So thank you once again to Jeff and Greg for your wonderful ideas and insights here around social innovation and for making this learning opportunity available. We once again want to thank BMO Harris Bank. Take care and enjoy the remainder of your day.
Thanks.
Thank you
Very much.